In this part, we will talk about Romanization and conversion to Arianism. Our mission today is, well, to really uncover how Roman influence permeated Gothic society.
Right, and not just through conquest, which is what people often think of first.
Exactly. It's this complex tapestry of trade, migration, strategic alliances. We want to explore how a specific form of Christianity, Arianism, became so deeply intertwined with Gothic identity.
And how that ultimately led to some pretty significant shifts in their political and cultural landscape. It's a fascinating period of change.
It really is. This isn't just, a history lesson. It's a deep dive into the surprising ways cultures blend and clash, and how identity itself can be forged, maybe even refashioned, under immense pressure.
It's a period of remarkable transformation, definitely. The very definitions of Roman and Gothic were, well, constantly being renegotiated. What often surprises people is how deeply Roman ways could penetrate, even without direct military occupation. It created this powerful, often invisible current that reshaped entire societies.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We often imagine Roman influence spreading through, the March of Legions or these grand building projects.
The aqueducts, the roads, yeah.
Right. But how did Roman culture really begin to seep into these East Germanic societies, like the Goths, long before any direct Roman conquest? It wasn't always the dramatic imperial display, was it?
No, you've hit on a crucial point there. The empire's greatest conquest wasn't always by the sword. It was often this invisible cultural infection, maybe?
Yeah.
A soft power so pervasive that Gothic societies absorbed Roman ways almost without noticing, without a single formal decree. What often surprises people is that this influence wasn't always direct.
Okay.
It came through surprisingly subtle, sometimes unexpected pathways. It reflects a more gradual, organic process rather than some abrupt imposition.
So less like a flood, more like a slow current, you mentioned.
Exactly. A slow, persistent current, subtly eroding and reshaping the cultural landscape over time.
That makes sense. So what were some of these quieter, yet you argue profoundly effective channels? How did Roman culture start to embed itself?
Well, one significant channel, and perhaps an underappreciated one, was through the remnants of Romanized customs.
Okay, carried by who?
Carried by indigenous populations. Imagine groups who have been living in a Roman administration for generations, maybe in areas Rome later sort of relinquished, or where its direct control just weakened.
Right, places on the frontier, perhaps.
Precisely. Even after Germanic newcomers, like various Gothic groups, moved into these territories, these existing populations retained their ways. They kept their farming practices, their local administrative habits, styles of dress, social norms.
The everyday stuff.
The everyday stuff, exactly. These habits, just persisting quietly in the background, they subtly influence the Germanic groups settling among or sometimes over them. It's like the quiet persistence of traditions that become part of the new fabric. It shows that the Roman legacy could endure and reshape new cultures from within. It's like a memory that outlived the formal empire itself.
So even if a Goth wasn't bumping into a Roman official every day, they were interacting with people who carried that cultural memory, almost like a Roman ghost in their daily lives.
That's a great way to put it, a cultural ghost. It paints a much more nuanced picture than just simple conquest, doesn't it?
It really does. What about physical objects? Did Roman things play a role? Stuff they could touch and see?
Oh, absolutely. Another very concrete pathway, and one that acted as a sort of cultural ambassador, was through Roman trade items.
Right, the pots, the jewelry.
Exactly. The exchange of goods across those vast frontiers, it meant more than just commerce. It introduced Roman aesthetics, Roman technologies, even Roman symbolic values into Gothic life.
Okay.
Think about the stories these items could tell. A finely crafted Roman brooch, maybe? A piece of sophisticated Samian-ware pottery? Or even just a silver coin with the emperor's face on it. These weren't just objects. They represented a different world, a different way of doing things. And they often carried immense prestige.
I can see that, like having the latest Roman gadget almost.
Kinda, yeah. Imagine a Gothic warrior seeing that intricate, gleaming Roman brooch. Maybe it inspires a shift in local craftsmanship. Maybe it just sparks a desire for the status it conferred. It subtly shifts tastes and aspirations within their own society. These were small, tangible links that fostered, well, maybe admiration, maybe just familiarity, leading towards assimilation.
So a simple trade item wasn't just a commodity, it was like a tiny cultural emissary, carrying Roman ideas and prestige without anyone consciously intending it that way.
Exactly. It's a powerful thought, isn't it?
It is. And what about situations where Rome wasn't even dealing directly with the Goths, but maybe with other groups who then influenced them? That sounds like a fascinating kind of ripple effect.
Yes, and we see this quite clearly with the distribution of Roman tribute, particularly the Huns.
Ah, the Huns. Looming large in this period.
Very large. By the late 4th century, many Gothic groups found themselves under the domination of the Huns. Rome, trying to manage this new formidable power, often paid tribute to the Huns. Gold, goods.
To keep the peace, or buy them off.
Right. To maintain a fragile peace or secure temporary alliances. Now, this tribute frequently included vast quantities of Roman goods, and perhaps even administrative ideas or diplomatic protocols, however diluted they became, could trickle down the Hunnic hierarchy to the Goths who served them.
So Roman stuff paid to the Huns ends up influencing the Goths under the Huns.
Precisely. Roman goods, funded by imperial policy, end up in Hunnic hands, and from there, influence the Gothic groups under Hunnic sway. It's a fascinating indirect spread of Roman influence through a third party, like a game of cultural telephone where the message gets passed along, maybe a bit garbled, but still distinctly Roman in origin.
It's a really complex web of influence, truly. And then we have something that ties directly into our broader topic today, conversion. The increasingly visible presence of Christians among or near these groups.
Yes.
This must have opened up an entirely new avenue for Roman culture to penetrate, right?
This is where it gets absolutely critical for our deep dive today. The growing number of Christians, whether they were, say, indigenous Roman citizens who remained, or captives assimilated into Gothic society, or individuals from various backgrounds living among or near these Germanic groups. They brought a whole new layer of Roman cultural and social structure with them. Christianity at this time was deeply, deeply intertwined with the Roman state.
Its organization, its literacy.
Exactly. Its sophisticated organizational forms, its literate traditions, its theological debates, its social hierarchies. As Christianity spread, it carried elements of Roman social organization, Roman legal thought, Roman intellectual life with it.
So it wasn't just changing gods.
Not at all.
Yeah,
It
no.
subtly but significantly transformed Gothic communities from within. It wasn't just a change of faith. It was an introduction to a completely different mode of societal organization, one that was fundamentally Roman in its DNA at that point.
This brings us perfectly to Ulfila, a truly pivotal figure in Gothic history. He was a Gothic bishop, and his work seems to have profoundly shaped Gothic identity, even their literacy. How did he emerge from this environment of subtle Romanization, and what was his larger impact?
Well, to understand Ulfila, you really have to connect him to the bigger picture. This society was right on the cusp of profound change. He wasn't just a religious figure. He was a true cultural bridge builder,
Okay.
operating at this critical juncture between the Gothic world and the Roman Empire. And his story really highlights the early and often volatile political implications of religious conversion.
I can imagine. Converting to a new faith, especially one so closely associated with a powerful empire that was often an adversary, that must have raised serious questions of loyalty, identity crises even.
It absolutely did. The leaders of the Tervingi, who were a prominent Gothic subgroup, they were deeply suspicious of these early Gothic Christians.
Why? What was the fear?
They worried that by adopting the Roman religion, these Goths might become, well, more loyal to Rome, the very power they often fought against, than to their own people and their traditional structures.
Ah, so seeing Christianity as a potential fifth column.
Essentially, yes. This tension wasn't purely theological, it was fundamentally political. They saw Christianity, particularly in its Roman form, as a potential Trojan horse for imperial influence and control, something that could undermine their independent Gothicness.
So this intense suspicion, maybe even outright persecution, it led to a pretty dramatic event, didn't it? Ulfila and his followers faced an incredibly stark choice.
Indeed, it led to a momentous decision. This suspicion and persecution compelled Ulfila and a substantial part of the Gothic Christian community to make the difficult choice to leave their homeland, Gothia.
Wow.
Imagine the weight of that decision. Abandon your new faith or abandon your ancestral lands. Their decision wasn't just a flight from persecution. It was a foundational act that shaped Gothic Christianity for centuries.
And where did they go? Did Rome, the supposed source of this perceived threat, actually welcome them? Seems ironic.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they did. Seeking imperial asylum, Ulfila and his people turned to Emperor Constantius,
Okay.
who, recognizing the potential value of having a loyal Christian Gothic community within his borders, granted them land and protection inside the Roman Empire.
Strategic move for Constantius too, then.
Oh, absolutely. A strategic move on both sides. It offered the Goths protection and a new home, while potentially providing the empire with a Christianized buffer population, maybe even a source of future army recruits who owed their allegiance directly to the emperor.
That's a remarkable turn of events. Really shows the complex, often pragmatic relationship between Rome and its neighbors. Now, once settled, these Goths were given a rather distinctive name, weren't they? The Gothi Minores, the Little Goths. What did this new settlement, this unique designation, mean for their developing identity?
Well, this raises an important question, doesn't it? How did their unique situation foster this essential cultural achievement that would echo through history? For generations, these Goths were known as the Gothi Minores.
The Little Goths.
Literally, the Little Goths. The name itself suggests a distinct Roman-sanctioned identity. It set them apart from their kin who remained north of the Danube. They were, in a sense, a special enclave, protected, distinct. Their very name reflected their unique status within the Roman world.
And it was in this new home, with this newly defined, almost hybrid identity, that Ulfila undertook his most famous and enduring work, something that literally gave the Gothic language a new life and left an indelible mark on Germanic culture.
Precisely. It was here, amidst the Gothi Minores, that Ulfila undertook his magnum opus, the translation of the Bible into Gothic.
Which was a monumental task, I imagine.
Monumental doesn't even quite cover it. A linguistic and cultural achievement of the first order. Ulfila didn't just translate existing texts, he essentially invented a written script for Gothic.
Invented it.
Right.
Wow.
Yes, borrowing from Greek and Latin alphabets, but tailoring it precisely to capture Gothic sounds and syntax. This wasn't merely about religious dissemination, though that was key. It provided the Goths with the earliest extensive written example of any Germanic language.
A cornerstone for their identity.
Absolutely, a cornerstone of their distinct identity for centuries to come. Imagine the power of being able to read sacred texts in your own tongue. It's a profound act of cultural self-definition, especially happening in the shadow of Rome.
It really is.
This Gothic Bible solidified their cultural heritage while simultaneously embracing and propagating a new faith. It truly is a testament to his vision and perseverance. He crafted a legacy that transcended mere theology, offering his people both spiritual guidance and a tangible written identity.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting and intensely political. Fast forward to 375 AD. The Gothic world is plunged into chaos by the sudden, terrifying arrival of the Huns.
A pivotal moment.
Facing an existential threat, the Visigoths, a powerful Gothic subgroup, made a fateful, politically charged decision. What was the catalyst for this monumental shift?
You've set the stage perfectly. The Huns' arrival was a cataclysm for the Goths, an almost apocalyptic event. Their traditional kingdoms collapsed, and facing this overwhelming, utterly brutal force, the larger part of the Tervingi, soon followed by the Greuthungi Goths, made a desperate, almost unthinkable move.
So they sought protection from the very empire they had often been at odds with, the Romans. This must have been an act of profound desperation.
Indeed. Profound desperation is the right phrase. The Visigoths sent ambassadors to Emperor Valens. He was the brother of Valentinian, ruling in the east in what was then called Romania, basically the Eastern Roman Empire around Constantinople. They were effectively seeking asylum within imperial borders.
Yeah.
Their offer was stark. They would submit to Roman laws if they were granted land for settlement in Thrace or Moesia.
A direct appeal for protection, essentially trading independence for survival.
Exactly. A surrender of their previous independence for the sake of survival.
Valens clearly saw an immense opportunity here. But what was the precise price of that asylum for the Visigoths? And how did Valens cleverly use their desperation to advance his own theological agenda? Because he had one, didn't he?
Oh, he absolutely had one. The price was conversion, but with a specific, and for Valens, highly strategic twist. This forms a crucial conversion clause.
Okay.
The Visigothic ambassadors, to ensure Valens' confidence in their submission and show they were willing to integrate, promised to become Christians. However, they had a practical condition. They needed teachers who spoke their own language.
Makes sense.
Now, Valens was a staunch proponent of Arianism. This was a form of Christianity distinct from the mainstream Nicene belief in the full divinity of Christ. He saw an unparalleled opportunity.
To spread his preferred version of Christianity.
Precisely. He readily agreed not just to grant them land, but critically, he dispatched preachers who favored his own Arian sect. This was a deliberate Valens Arian agenda in action, not just charity. He weaponized their desperation to spread his theological viewpoint.
And the outcome, as described by the, well, rather stark words of the historian Jordanes, was that Valens effectively made the Visigoths Arians rather than Christians. That's a powerful and pretty cynical assessment.
That phrase from Jordanes vividly captures the essence of this moment, doesn't it? It highlights that for many, perhaps most, this was a conversion of convenience and imperial policy, rather than deep theological conviction, at least initially.
Right.
The Visigoths desperately needed asylum and land. Valens ruthlessly used their vulnerability to spread Arianism. This strategic conversion, driven by political expediency and military necessity, planted the seeds for future religious and political conflicts with the Nicene or Orthodox Roman Empire. It created a lasting theological division that would define Germanic identity for centuries. It was a baptism not just into a new faith, but into a new, complex political reality.
So this initial Arian conversion wasn't just confined to the Visigoths, who crossed the Danube in 376 AD. How far did this imperial-sponsored faith spread among other Germanic peoples? Did it create a broader Arian landscape in Europe?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, this initial conversion had profound, wider implications. It really established Arianism as a significant religious and cultural force among many Germanic tribes. The Visigoths, having adopted Arianism, then became missionaries in their own right.
Really? That's fascinating. So they embraced it enough to then actively disseminate it themselves, even though it was kind of forced upon them initially.
Precisely. From their new settlements in Dacia Repensis, Moesia, and Thrace, the Visigoths, motivated by what the sources describe as the love they bore them, a phrase suggesting a powerful sense of kinship and shared identity. They preached Arianism to their kinsmen, the Ostrogoths, and also to the Gepidae. They explicitly invited all people of their speech everywhere to attach themselves to this sect.
So it became a shared identity marker?
Yes, very quickly. Arianism became a shared identity marker, linking various Germanic groups and, crucially, distinguishing them from the Nicene Romans. It cemented a sense of distinctiveness, of being us versus them.
Even with this new faith and the promise of settlement, it sounds like their troubles weren't exactly over. What were the immediate consequences of their settlement under Roman authority? Did the bargain deliver the stability they craved?
Unfortunately, no. Not in the short term. The immediate consequences were dire. Despite their new faith and new lands, the Goths soon faced severe challenges, particularly a devastating famine and want between 376 and 377 AD.
Oh, dear.
The Roman officials responsible for their resettlement often proved corrupt, exploiting the desperate Goths, selling them diseased meat, even dogs, for exorbitant prices, sometimes in exchange for their children being sold into servitude.
That's horrific.
It was horrific.
Yeah.
And, as often happens to a people not yet well settled in a foreign country, this pushed their leaders, Fritigern, Alathius, Saphrax, to further desperate actions, including open revolt against Roman authority.
So the famous Battle of Adrianople stems from this.
Directly. Their initial bargain with Valens had not brought stability or prosperity, but widespread suffering and eventually armed conflict that culminated in Valens's death at Adrianople.
This is where the story gets even more complex, maybe even paradoxical. How did Arianism, which was initially a Roman imposition by Emperor Valens, eventually become such a powerful marker of Gothicness, especially in opposition to Rome itself and its Orthodox Nicene Christianity? It seems like a strange, almost defiant twist.
It's a brilliant example of how an external imposition can be reappropriated, transformed to a symbol of defiance. The relationship between Arianism and Gothic identity was deeply complex. It served as a source of both integration among Goths and separation from the Roman Orthodox world.
Okay.
By the 4th century, what we might call Gothicness had become a powerful, self-assertive phenomenon, particularly in direct opposition to the Roman Empire.
So it became not just a religious affiliation, but a point of pride, almost a political statement against imperial power.
Exactly. We see this clearly in the rejection of Roman Christianity specifically, the Nicene or Orthodox form. In the 360s, after throwing off imperial political hegemony, the Goths seized the opportunity to crack down on Christianity.
Theodoric's persecution.
Right. But it's important to note, they firmly identified this particular form of Christianity with Rome itself. This wasn't necessarily a rejection of all Christianity, but a clear rejection of Roman Orthodoxy as a component of imperial control and cultural dominance.
So Arianism offered an alternative.
Precisely. It allowed them to be Christian, to participate in this powerful new faith, but crucially, to not be Roman Christian, thus preserving a distinct identity. It let them have their cake and eat it too, in a way.
And this sense of distinctiveness even extended to their very land, didn't it? Marking their territory as distinctly Gothic, separate from Roman dominion.
Yes, their identity developed a strong territorial dimension. Athenoric, the Gothic leader we just mentioned, famously refused to enter Roman territory. He forced Emperor Valens to meet him on a boat in the middle of the Danube in 369.
That's quite a statement.
It wasn't just stubbornness. It reflected a deeply developed sense of Gothic land versus Roman land, with the Danube serving as a significant physical and symbolic border. A Gothic liturgical text from the period even preserved the name Guthuna,
Which means?
the land of the Goths, powerfully emphasizing this territorial self-awareness and the burgeoning concept of a distinct Gothic nation or people.
And this wasn't an isolated phenomenon among the Goths, was it? Did other barbarian groups, similarly interacting with Rome, employ comparable strategies for asserting their independence?
Indeed, it wasn't unique to the Goths. We see a clear parallel with Alemannic leaders, for instance.
Okay.
They similarly met Roman emperors on boats and staunchly asserted their borders and independence.
Okay.
There's a telling incident involving Emperor Valentinian wanting to build a fort on the Alemannic side of the Rhine against custom, which the Alemanni fiercely resisted. This highlights a shared barbarian strategy, you might say, a way of defining and defending their independence against Roman encroachment, asserting their own territorial sovereignty. It demonstrates a common playbook for how these peripheral powers engaged with the imperial center.
These increasingly defined identity markers and the friction they created between Gothic traditions and Roman influence inevitably led to real-world consequences, specifically religious persecution. It's a tragic paradox, isn't it, to see a people persecuting a faith that, in another form, Arianism, was also their own.
What's fascinating here is precisely that tragic paradox and the shifting nature of us versus them. During Athanoric's persecution in the mid-4th century, he inflicted harsh punishments, including martyrdom, on Christians within Gothia.
And these weren't just Romans.
No, our sources indicate some bore Gothic names, while others had Phrygian, Cappadocian, Syrian names, suggesting a mixed but targeted Christian community within Gothic lands.
So why target them?
It seems less about stamping out Christianity entirely and more about eliminating what Athanoric perceived as a Roman element, a threat to Gothic cohesion and independence. Yet, despite its severity, his persecution ultimately failed to exterminate Gothic Christians.
Right.
Christian dignitaries were still among those who crossed the Danube in 376, showing the resilience of the faith and its deep roots within some Gothic communities.
So conversion, even under duress, was still a powerful force that couldn't be easily eradicated. Now, centuries later, in Visigothic Hispania, King Leovigild also tried to manage religious differences, but with a different, maybe more sophisticated strategy, aimed at forging a unified kingdom.
Yes, centuries later, late 6th century, we see King Leovigild's policies in Hispania around 581 AD. It reflects a different approach to religious uniformity, though still a forceful one.
What was his goal?
He sought to strengthen his Visigothic kingdom, which now ruled over a predominantly Catholic Hispano-Roman population, by integrating Catholics and Arians, Arianism being the predominant Gothic faith by then.
How did he try to do that?
He convened a synod of Arian bishops in Toledo. The goal, as one chronicler critically put it, was to amend ancient heresy with new error. His policy was quite specific. Catholics converting to Arianism should not be rebaptized.
Why not?
To make it easier, less of a barrier. They'd merely receive the imposition of hands in communion. This move aimed for unity, trying to make entry into the Arian Church softer, more appealing for the Catholic majority, while explicitly maintaining Arian distinctiveness as the faith of the Gothic ruling elite.
It sounds like an attempt at accommodation, maybe a clever way to bridge the divide. But he also had a much darker, more coercive side to his religious policies, didn't he? It wasn't all gentle persuasion.
No, definitely not. Despite these attempts at accommodation and subtle persuasion, the darker side of Leovigild's rule was undeniably evident.
Such as?
He launched active persecutions against Catholics who resisted his overtures. He exiled bishops, seized church revenues and privileges, and often compelled many to convert to Arianism through terror and intimidation.
So force and incentives.
Exactly. Others he enticed with golden goods, leveraging material incentives for religious conversion. Controversially, he also rebaptized Catholics, including priests like Vincent of Zaragoza, an act considered utterly appalling by Nicene Christians. Isidore of Seville calls Vincent an apostate from bishop to infernal depths after this.
Oh, wow. Strong words.
It reveals a pragmatic, often brutal and multifaceted approach to religious uniformity, driven by clear political ends. Strengthen his Arian-led kingdom, consolidate power over a religiously divided populace.
Given these intense religious tensions and Leovigild's forceful, sometimes contradictory policies, it seems almost inevitable that conflict would erupt, even within his own royal family. How did these internal divisions manifest, and what role did religious allegiance play in fracturing the Visigothic royal house?
This raises an important question, doesn't it, about the profound intertwining of faith and dynastic struggle in this era. The internal struggles under Leovigild paint a vivid picture of how religious allegiance could be weaponized for political gain, profoundly shaping the very fabric of the state.
And his own son, Hermenegild, was at the very center of one of these dramatic conflicts, wasn't he? His conversion seems to have lit the fuse for a major rebellion.
Yes, in 579, Leovigild's son, Hermenegild, launched a major rebellion against his father. Crucially, and with immense political foresight, he strategically embraced Catholicism.
Ah, switching sides, religiously speaking.
Exactly. By converting to the Nicene faith, Hermenegild fundamentally transformed his rebellion. He portrayed himself as a persecuted figure, a champion of orthodoxy against his Arian father, and actively sought alliances based on his new religious affiliation.
Smart politics.
A bold move, absolutely, turning what might have been a purely dynastic squabble into a religiously charged civil war, imbuing it with far greater significance and drawing in powerful external players.
And he didn't just stand alone. He managed to gather a rather impressive and diverse coalition of Catholic allies. This transformed his rebellion into a genuine religious and political movement who rallied to his banner.
He did, and it really illustrates the power of religious solidarity at this time. Hermenegild found support from several powerful quarters. He allied with the Byzantines, who still had a presence in Hispania, down in the south.
Okay.
He also gained the backing of local potentates, powerful Hispano-Roman landowners, and regional leaders, whose independence Leovigild had been trying to curtail.
So enemies of his father.
Naturally.
Eh?
Furthermore, he secured the allegiance of the Suebi, another Germanic kingdom in northwestern Spain that had converted to Catholicism a generation earlier. They found common cause in their shared faith.
Right.
And finally, his Frankish in-laws, themselves Catholic, also lent their support. This illustrates how religious affiliation became an incredibly powerful tool for political maneuvering and alliance building. It cut across traditional ethnic or even national lines, shaping the very course of dynastic struggles. The conflict became a kind of proxy war, with Catholicism as a unifying banner against an Arian king seeking a consolidated, unified Arian state.
So what does this all mean for the future of the Visigothic kingdom? After years of Arian identity, even active promotion and persecution of Catholics under Leovigild, why did the kingdom ultimately decide to switch to Catholicism? It seems like a dramatic reversal, almost an admission of strategic failure.
Well, what's fascinating here is that it wasn't just a sudden change of heart, a moment of profound spiritual awakening for the entire kingdom. It was more a sober and pragmatic recognition of Arianism's diminishing power
How so?
and its fundamental failure to truly unify the kingdom. The Arian faith among the Goths had, by the late 6th century, fallen significantly, into the background.
What do you mean by into the background? Was it a lack of intellectual vigor, or was it losing popular support among the broader populace? Or both?
It was both, actually. The Gothic Arian faith was significantly into the background intellectually and in terms of popular piety when compared to Roman Orthodox Catholicism.
Interesting.
This suggests a perceived weakness in its ability to inspire, innovate, and crucially, to unify. Orthodox Catholicism, with its deep intellectual traditions, its growing monastic movements, its widespread appeal among the Hispano-Roman majority, it simply had more cultural and spiritual momentum. Arianism, by contrast, remained largely a faith of the Gothic elite, and its intellectual development had perhaps stagnated. It was seen as an ancient error by the majority, a relic that fostered division rather than cohesion.
And Leovigild's reign, despite his forceful attempts at unification under Arianism, probably offered a harsh, undeniable lesson for his successor, Reccared. What specifically do you think Recopolis learned from his father's policies?
Absolutely. The lessons from Leovigild's failure were stark and undeniable. His policies, despite their often brutal implementation, failed to create lasting religious unity or stability. If anything, the exacerbated divisions look at Hermenegild's costly rebellion, the constant internal strife.
Right.
This failure likely informed Rickard's understanding of the deep-seated problem. Arianism, far from being a unifier, was a perpetual source of friction between the Gothic ruling class and their Hispano-Roman subjects. For Reccared, the political instability caused by this religious division was simply unsustainable for a kingdom striving for long-term survival and prosperity.
So the burden of unifying the kingdom, healing these deep religious and ethnic divisions, fell to Leovigild's son Reccared. And he chose a radically different path than his father. This must have been a high-stakes decision fraught with political peril.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Reccared's decision was indeed incredibly high stakes, with profound consequences for the kingdom's future. He drew a clear and ultimately correct lesson from his father's struggles.
Which was?
If he wanted to achieve true unity for the Visigothic kingdom, integrating the Gothic elite with the Hispano-Roman majority, conversion to Catholicism was the only viable path. It was a strategic decision for long-term stability, recognizing that a shared faith was a far stronger foundation than forced adherence.
But he didn't just declare it for the state, did he? His own personal conversion actually preceded the official state conversion. That suggests something deeper, perhaps more calculated.
That's a crucial point. It highlights both his political acumen and perhaps personal conviction. His personal conversion to Catholicism, which happened around 587 AD, actually preceded the official state conversion at the Third Council of Toledo in 589 AD. This suggests a deliberate, maybe even heartfelt shift that he then leveraged politically. By embracing Catholicism himself, he set a powerful example, demonstrated his commitment, and prepared the ground for the kingdom-wide change. It made it clear this was top-down, but with genuine conviction, intended to be permanent.
Even with his personal commitment and the clear political benefits, a shift of this magnitude, overturning centuries of Arian identity for the Gothic elite, it wouldn't happen without significant resistance. I imagine this wasn't a smooth, universally accepted transition.
Oh, you're absolutely right. This monumental change did not happen overnight or without considerable turmoil. Reccared's conversion and the subsequent declaration of Catholicism as the state religion was followed by what sources call a decade of intense conflict.
A decade. Wow.
Yes, this wasn't just quiet dissent or grumbling. It involved powerful Arian factions among the nobility and clergy who saw this as an attack on their power, their privilege, their very Gothic identity.
So real pushback.
Real pushback. Political conspiracies, local skirmishes, a protracted battle for the hearts and minds of the Gothic elite. This period of struggle underscores just how deeply Arianism had become entwined with Gothic identity and how difficult it was to untangle, even when the pragmatic reasons for change were so compelling. Reccared had to navigate these treacherous waters very carefully, solidifying his power and enforcing the new religious order.
Councils often mark major turning points in the history of church and state. What did the 13th Council of Toledo signify for the Visigoths? This is much later, right? How did it help institutionalize Catholicism as the unifying force?
This raises an important question about how political and religious power coalesce and are formalized over time. The institutionalization of Catholicism through these councils was a key step in solidifying the kingdom's new direction and ensuring its long-term stability. It demonstrates ongoing efforts to maintain that unity, even centuries after the initial conversion.
And who is the key figure behind this particular council, almost a century after Reccared's pivotal decision?
This council, convened by King Euric in 683 AD, so yes, nearly a century after Reccared, highlights this ongoing process of consolidating Catholic rule and dealing with internal challenges that still arose.
Okay.
It boasted a significant attendance, not just bishops, but also over 20 illustrious men of the Palatine office, high-ranking court officials serving the king. And interestingly, many of them still bore Gothic names.
So still a blend, even then.
Exactly. It demonstrates a fascinating blend of Gothic identity still present within the now thoroughly Romanized administrative and ecclesiastical structure. Shows how the elite had adapted and integrated, but perhaps not entirely forgotten their heritage.
What were the primary goals of this 13th Council? Was it purely religious, or did it have significant political aims as well? That interplay between church and state seems constant.
It was a clear demonstration of that profound intertwining. The council's primary goals were deeply political. First, to re-establish rights to the throne, secure Eurigild's own position, and crucially, to restore the prerogatives, rights, and goods of nobles who had rebelled against the previous king, Wamba.
Reconciliation.
Reconciliation and stability. Eurigild aimed to restore stability and prevent future abuses of justice, explicitly making Catholicism the unifying force binding the kingdom. by welcoming back exiles, restoring rights, affirming justice for all figures, secular or ecclesiastical. He sought to heal deep-seated divisions and strengthen cohesion under the banner of a unified Catholic faith.
So, statecraft through religion.
A powerful act of statecraft, absolutely, using religious consensus to secure and legitimize political order.
Beyond the profound religious shifts we've discussed, how did Gothic rulers actively project a Roman image to solidify their power and legitimacy, even when they were effectively replacing Roman authority? It seems they recognized the enduring symbolic power of Rome, almost like a shared cultural currency.
What's fascinating here is precisely that recognition. A deep understanding that to rule effectively over former Roman populations, they needed to tap into that ingrained reverence for Roman tradition. Theodoric, the great Ostrogothic king in Italy, is a prime example.
Right.
He deeply understood the symbolic power of Roman tradition and consciously adopted it to legitimize his rule, not just for his Gothic followers, but for the vast Roman population he now governed.
How did he manage this delicate balance? He was a powerful Gothic king, but ruling in Italy, a former Roman heartland steeped in imperial history, must have been a careful tightrope walk.
It was indeed a masterful balancing act. Theodoric promoted the traditional idea of imperial unity, fraternity with the East, with Constantinople, which was still the living heart of the Roman Empire. Yet he also boldly staked a claim for the West's separate existence as one of two Roman republics. He was navigating this delicate balance, acknowledging Rome's enduring legacy while asserting his own distinctly Western Gothic authority. He saw himself as Rome's protector and continuator in the West, not its destroyer.
And this wasn't just a general idea. He adopted very specific Roman forms of address and titles. Going beyond simply being king, he truly embraced the imperial vocabulary, didn't he?
He absolutely did. In Italy, he was addressed with a truly impressive array of traditional imperial epithets and titles. It reflects a conscious appropriation of Roman majesty.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, well, gloriosissimus adque inclitus rex, most glorious and renowned king. Victor ac triumphator, victor and triumpher. Semper Augustus, ever Augustus, just like the emperors.
Wow.
Bonus republicanatus, born for the good of the republic, implying a divine mandate. Cusos libertatis et propagator Romani nominis, guardian of liberty and propagator of the Roman name.
He really went for it.
Oh yes. Domitor gentium, subduer of nations. And clementissimi principis, most clement prince. This demonstrated a conscious, extensive effort to align himself with even appropriate Roman imperial authority, using its very language and historical weight to describe and legitimize his rule. He was, in essence, performing Romanness for his subjects.
That's an astonishing list of titles. It sounds like he wasn't just copying. He was actively inhabiting the role of a Roman emperor, at least in perception. Did this embrace of imperial symbols extend even to the most sacred accoutrements of Roman majesty, like imperial clothing?
Absolutely. His appropriation of imperial symbols went deep. Theodoric went so far as to requisition sacred purple robes annually.
In the imperial purple.
The imperial purple itself. Now, one account suggested he didn't require such ornate robes for himself, but it never claimed he didn't wear them. And the adoption of the diadem by Roman emperors, adorned with pearls and jewels, that was a powerful expression of majesty, even divinity. This symbolism wasn't lost on the Gothic rulers. They understood its deep historical and political resonance, using it to visually represent their connection to imperial power and legitimacy. They knew that in a world still mentally oriented towards Rome, to look like an emperor was a big part of being a legitimate ruler.
So this embrace of Roman identity wasn't just superficial titles and robes. How did it translate into tangible improvements, especially for Roman cities themselves? Cities which had often suffered during the tumultuous late empire. It seems like Gothic rulers actively contributed to the revival of Roman urban life rather than just exploiting it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, it wasn't merely superficial adoption. Gothic rulers like Theodoric actively invested in the restoration and preservation of Roman urban infrastructure and cultural dignity. They understood that to rule effectively, they had to be seen as protectors and continuators of the Roman way of life, not just conquerors. They knew a thriving Roman infrastructure would bolster their own legitimacy and prosperity.
Can you give us a concrete example of this kind of investment in the physical fabric of the Roman world? What did this commitment look like on the ground?
Certainly. Consider Theodoric, again, sometimes called Theodoric the Great or the Younger, to distinguish him from an earlier namesake. After defeating Odovacar, he reigned for nearly half a century in Italy.
A long reign.
A very long and relatively stable reign. He played a truly significant role in restoring Rome's dignity, which had suffered during years of conflict and neglect. He famously oversaw the rebuilding of Rome's ancient walls.
A massive undertaking.
Monumental. It signaled stability, protection, a commitment to the city's future. This wasn't just functional repair, it was a powerful symbolic gesture that resonated deeply with the Roman populace. And in recognition of his efforts, the Roman Senate even awarded him a gold statue.
A gold statue from the Senate.
Exactly. This demonstrates a clear, substantial investment in the Roman urban landscape and a conscious effort to present himself as a legitimate successor and benefactor of Roman tradition. It helped earn the loyalty and respect of his new subjects.
As Gothic kingdoms settled and established themselves, especially in places like Spain, how did the very definition of Gothic begin to evolve? It sounds like it started to encompass much more than just bloodline or ethnic origin, blurring lines we might assume were rigid.
This raises an important question about the fluidity of identity in post-Roman Europe, doesn't it? The need for internal stability and effective governance led to a fascinating social transformation, where Gothic became more of a political and social status, rather than a purely ethnic designation based solely on ancestry. It was a pragmatic shift that changed the very composition of the ruling class.
So once the immediate threat of Roman imperial power waned and the Goths were firmly established as rulers in Spain, the old ethnic unities and distinctions started to break down internally.
Exactly. Once the immediate threat diminished and the Visigoths settled into ruling, the older, more rigid Gothic unities began to break down. This created a new, evolving social dynamic within the kingdom. You had Roman landowners.
The established local power.
Right. Always the local power brokers, possessing vast estates, wealth, influence. They were keen to maintain their status and protect their interests under the new Gothic regime. And to do so, they increasingly desired to be counted among the kingdom's elite, to have a seat at the table.
And the Visigothic rulers, seeing the need for a stable internal power base and efficient administration, must have recognized the importance of including these locally powerful figures, regardless of their ethnic background, just practical governance.
Precisely. The Visigothic body politic, driven by the need for internal unity, control over territory, frontier security, they found it necessary to include all or most of the locally powerful figures, regardless of original ethnic background. It was a pragmatic decision for effective governance and long-term stability. They recognized you couldn't effectively rule a vast territory without the cooperation of its established elites.
So this process effectively created a new kind of Gothic elite, a blended class that moved beyond simple ethnic distinctions.
It absolutely did. This process generated what we can call a new Gothic landowning elite. It comprised not only descendants of the original Gothic immigrants, but also many Hispano-Romans who had achieved or maintained elite status within the new political order.
Fascinating.
This blurred the lines between the two groups significantly, fostering a truly blended society where status, wealth, power, and loyalty to the kingdom became paramount, rather than purely ancestral origins. It's a testament to the adaptability of these societies and the pragmatism of their rulers, creating a powerful, fused aristocracy that governed Visigothic Spain.
And this integration extended even to the military, which you might think would be the last bastion of a purely Gothic identity, the very heart of their power. How did the composition of Gothic armies reflect this blending?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the idea of a purely Gothic army becomes increasingly complex when you examine the evidence. It was far from a monolithic ethnic force, especially over time. The reality was much more diverse, much more integrated.
So, for example, Theodoric's army that invaded Italy, the force that established Ostrogothic rule, it wasn't just Ostrogoths. That kind of flies in the face of the common perception.
No, not at all. You're hitting on a key insight. Theodoric's army that invaded Italy was not purely Ostrogothic. It was a federate force, a grand coalition.
Okay.
It included a diverse array of elements: Rugi, Heruli, Syrian, Tercelingian, Suevic, Sarmatian, Typhalian.
A real mix.
A real mix. Some soldiers even had Allan or Celtic names, indicating their varied origins. This polyethnic character was intensified even further after the defeat of Odovacar, as more diverse contingents joined Theodoric's forces, drawn by the promise of land and, well, plunder. This wasn't a unified ethnic army, but a powerful, multinational fighting force under Gothic leadership.
And were Romans themselves actively serving in these Gothic armies, or was it primarily Gothic warriors with just a few foreign auxiliaries? It seems like a leap for a Roman to fight for a Gothic king.
You might be surprised by the extent of that integration. Even though late antique Roman law generally excluded provincials from obligatory military service, there were certainly Romans who were, as the sources sometimes suggest, Goths at heart.
Meaning?
Individuals who had become integrated into Gothic society, perhaps through intermarriage, patronage, or just a pragmatic shift in allegiance, and who actively participated in Gothic armies. The lines weren't as clear-cut as Roman versus Goth on the battlefield. Loyalty and shared interest often superseded ethnic origin. We even have evidence that some Gothic soldiers married Roman women, further illustrating this integration at a societal level, right down to the family unit.
And for something as fundamental as building and defending towns and fortifications, was it still a segregated effort or a truly shared responsibility across ethnic lines?
It was definitely a regional military organization that relied on shared responsibility. For the construction, maintenance, garrisoning of cities and fortresses, local Gothic landowners and Romans were both called upon.
Both groups.
Both groups. Called upon to contribute their resources, labor, manpower. This wasn't just an elite military function. It was a shared civic duty, a responsibility for community, defense, and infrastructure. It further solidified the blending of identities at a practical, everyday level. It shows a truly integrated society, at least in terms of shared civic duties and protection, highlighting how much these kingdoms relied on the contributions of all their inhabitants.
Finally, let's consider the enduring role of the Church, and particularly its leaders, in shaping and documenting this Romanized Gothic world. They weren't just spiritual figures, were they? They seemed to play an almost indispensable role in the very functioning of these new kingdoms.
This raises an important question about the intellectual class of the time, doesn't it? And many of them, indeed, wore a bishop's mitre. In both Gothic and later periods, there was a strong persuasion, almost an expectation, that important events, the very history of the realm, should be recorded by prelates.
Why them specifically?
Well, they possessed the literacy, the education, and the organizational structures, the scriptoria, the networks, to do so effectively.
So bishops essentially became the official chroniclers and historians of the Gothic kings. That gives them an immense amount of influence over the narrative.
Precisely. They were the scribes of history, the keepers of memory. Figures like Adacio, a bishop in Galicia, Esquand of Alclara, bishop of Girona, the great S. Isidoro of Sevilla, Maximo, Esbrolio of Zaragoza, S. Ildefonso, S. Julian, Felix of Toledo.
A long list of bishop historians.
A very long list. They were all bishops who chronicled events. This practice continued for centuries, with bishops meticulously documenting the reigns of kings, the significant happenings of their time, and shaping the official narrative of the Visigothic kingdom. They weren't just passive observers, they were active participants in crafting the historical record.
This must have given the Church immense influence, not just over people's souls, but over how history itself was understood and passed down, essentially shaping the very identity of the state in the eyes of future generations.
It did. This practice meant that religious leaders were not just spiritual guides, but also key political advisors, intellectual powerhouses, and, yes, historians. They profoundly influenced how the story of the Goths was told and understood, often from a perspective that integrated religious and secular power, emphasizing the Catholic identity of the now unified kingdom. Think of Isidore of Seville, whose monumental Etymologiae was this comprehensive encyclopedia of all knowledge, grammar, astronomy, medicine, law. It became a foundational text that shaped European intellect for centuries.
And written by a bishop in Visigothic Spain?
Exactly, in a Visigothic kingdom that had fully embraced Catholicism. This truly underlines the enduring influence of the Church in governance and record-keeping, serving as the intellectual backbone and often the moral conscience of the state, ensuring that the legacy of a Romanized and Catholicized Visigothic kingdom lived on in the written word.
And that brings us to the end of this truly fascinating deep dive into the Romanization and conversion to Arianism among the Goths. We've journeyed from the subtle seep of trade goods and Romanized customs all the way to grand imperial pronouncements and these profound religious and political shifts that shaped the very identity of these powerful peoples. It's clear that identity is rarely static, isn't it? Often a blend of choices and historical currents.
It truly shows how no culture exists in a vacuum. Beliefs, even when initially adopted for practical or strategic reasons, like Arianism arguably was for the Visigoths, can become defining aspects of a people's story. They evolve and reshape with each generation. The Goths' journey through Arianism and ultimately to Catholicism is just such a powerful example of this dynamic, demonstrating how deeply intertwined faith and politics can become.
So, as you, our listeners, reflect on this, maybe consider this provocative thought. How much of our own cultural identity today is a deliberate choice, something we actively embrace, and how much is shaped by the immense, often unseen tides of history, those deep currents of influence, and maybe the fundamental needs of survival and adaptation? Something to ponder. Join us next time as our study continues, exploring how these Romanized and Christianized Goths further shaped the course of European history and the sophisticated kingdoms they built.